Welcome to Councillor Alex Makin, the Mayor of the City of Port Phillip. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. It's good to be back.
Yes, and look, it's been a big final last meeting of the year at Council with some pretty heavy lifting being done. The combination of a year of hard work. So that's what we're talking about today. So why don't you tell us quickly about the three key items that went through on Wednesday?
There was a lot on the council agenda, as you rightfully point out. We had three very significant items, and in fact, a range of significant items, several of those also more broadly across Port Phillip. But I guess the particular focal points are the homelessness and affordable housing strategy, the community safety plan, and of course the local law and the progression to the next stage. Beyond that, there was a whole range of other items as well.
Well, I think the interesting thing is virtually everything at the council meeting was unanimous, except the local laws discussion. So Would that be correct? I think that was my understanding.
From my recollection, that was correct as well. The only point that wasn't unanimous, and in fact, when we look at the local law motion, that was actually split into parts. So the only piece that wasn't unanimous was the actual local law and that embarking on the statutory consultation itself. When you look at the rest of that motion, including support for the protocol and the community engagement, that side of it was unanimous.
Yes, well, I think, it's churlish for me to just focus on the bit that's contentious, but we'll get to that. But so I think it is an achievement to, I think it's worth spending a minute or two on the big policies that were fully supported, because the homeless and affordable housing strategy is a big deal. Like, it aims for zero homelessness. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. And I think this really shows the City of Port Phillip has a proactive approach in how we can reduce homelessness and improve housing affordability. And that is very much the intent of that plan. It is looking at where can we support community housing providers and social support organisations, and where can we advocate, particularly to the state government, which governs our planning system, in actually increasing the ability to diversify housing stock and make our homes more affordable. And it is that ripple effect, right? As houses become less and less affordable, that ripples and has flow-on effect right through the system.
Yes, and it boldly seeks to have effectively a zero homeless strategy. So it's not a shrinking violet policy.
No, it's certainly not. And what I really like about that strategy is the fact that it really looks at the whole spectrum of housing security and tenure. So from rough sleeping through to, what are the levers that we can advocate for to improve affordability of homes as well. And look, as I think I mentioned last time, I rent in Port Melbourne. The 12-month sort of lease agreements are something that I feel each year as well. So this is really that whole spectrum approach around housing.
Yeah, so I want to give you some acknowledgement for the fact that was unanimous, that there was significant money put in there that's supported from all sides of council. So, we've got to note that. I'm preparing the ground for something coming here, but we have to note that. So the second thing is the community safety plan was also endorsed unanimously. So how would you describe the key features of that?
Yeah, the community safety plan really looks at how we can enhance the safety of our public spaces and obviously our community here in Port Phillip. So once again, takes a very proactive approach in, firstly, what are the design principles to make our community spaces, make our public spaces safer by design, as well as also how do we support organisations in increasing social connectedness and cohesiveness.
Yes, well, again, supported unanimously. and there's quite a deal of dollars associated from that. But that's got spectrum from all sides of council, support from all sides of council, which then gets us to the local laws, which I want to really explore why this is the odd one out. So tell me, is this true? Was there commitment was there effort put behind the scenes to reach a unanimous vote on that?
Look, certainly, and as you would have seen through the agenda item, we had three options that were put forward. Option A, which was effectively the encampments, the designated zones, which was the earlier work that council had undertaken. Option B, which was a newer model that had been subject to a lot of discussion across council, where we very much look at it from a behavioural perspective rather than a situational perspective. And then option C, that was no change. So they were sort of the three scenarios that were discussed with councillors. And, I must commend my colleagues for, regardless of how they voted in the chamber, everyone was engaged in that conversation. Everyone was proactive in putting forward viewpoints to get to a level of, I guess, acceptability around what the potential model could look like. And I have always said that we want to make sure that we target behaviours rather than situations. Port Phillip is rightfully very proactive in looking at how it can reduce homelessness, as you've acknowledged, and as well as also how we can assist rough sleepers. This is very much a behavioural response to where there's situations that require escalation.
Okay, well, but do you see where I'm going here, Alex? There's a lot of goodwill in the room. There's a lot of support for a lot of things, yet you couldn't reach a unanimous verdict on this one, to put it in kind of court parlance. So what do you attribute that to?
Look, I'd like to make sure that my council colleagues have the freedom to vote as they wish. I was not going to bind my council colleagues to a particular choice. I engaged across the chamber and across with my council colleagues around the options. Option B very much was a desire to find potential points of compromise. And at the end of the day, the chamber vote is what the chamber vote is. But I think we need to acknowledge the goodwill and discussion that every single councillor has undertaken in this. How they vote on the night is just simply the vote, right? Like, there's a lot of discussion that took place prior to that out of these scenarios. How could it be workable? How could we ensure that a local law response actually better enables the sort of aims that we're trying to fulfill here? So how do we make sure that we frame it around behaviours, not situation? And, when you look at the community feedback, I believe that is generally sort of reflective of the community feedback as well. We're not criminalising homelessness and rough sleeping. In fact, the proposed local law is very explicit in not criminalising that. This is a behavioural response which came up in a lot of the public discourse that we had on Wednesday night as well.
Now, Councillor Buckingham's main argument against the law was that similar laws in Queensland at the Moreton Bay Council have led to protracted legal expenses, including a Supreme Court challenge. Did you get advice on that?
Yeah, look, council obviously seeks a range of advice around any time it undertakes a local law review and a proposed amendment to our local laws. Once again, this is why we're looking at that behavioural response rather than a blanket sort of designated zones, which was option A. This is very much around looking at, where are the behavioural triggers where we do require escalation, noting that, in the first instance, part of that escalation is actually ensuring that there is intervention from community service providers and housing providers, and then further escalating from there. And, we should note that option B does have the support of the Victoria Police as well, in terms of something that they can work with and a model that they can work with. This is a model that I believe ensures that we have the suitable escalations and ensures that we recognise the work of our service providers and ensures that we recognise the work of Victoria Police and a model that they can work within as well. Best case scenarios, we never need to enforce this law, right? But it is part of the toolkit should we need to do it.
Okay, well, another theme that I think emerged in this whole community discussion is what accountability is there on behalf of the community agencies for doing what they say they'll do in this. So what steps is council going to take to see that the grants are acquitted effectively?
And look, accountability has been a key focus of mine since being elected back in 2024, so a year ago now. And this is where we are going to have stronger service agreements with our community service providers so that there is that accountability. Similarly, part of the response around the local law is ensuring, and we would hope that Victoria Police sort of play their part as well. I think, a real shame, I guess, around this debate has been the fact that there's almost been this sort of dichotomy of, service providers and police on the other end, when really this is around how do we make the system work better overall? How do we ensure that there's support for organisations that are on the ground trying to reduce homelessness while also working with police if there are situations that do require that endpoint in terms of escalation? I don't necessarily see this as a dichotomy of opposing views, right? It's how do we actually look at where we can make the system and the various sort of tools that we have available, bearing in mind that once again, council is very limited in terms of its toolkit, but how can we make sure that the limited tools that we have work more effectively? And, it's the nature of our society, right, where there are laws and laws, enforcement is an ultimate escalation point.
Okay, well, we'll end it with that. I think that I did contact the Moreton Bay Council. Very interesting there. There's a whole other story in that. But the mayor in Moreton Bay had a significant quote. And his quote was that in situations like homelessness, the feds have the money, the state has the power, and the local government have the problem. So that's and they've learned more about that in the Supreme Court. So
I think the
it's a
challenge
dynamic
is
area.
cost shifting, right? And where each level of government takes responsibility. And the city of Port Phillip is very proactive in its responses in a number of areas. Even looking beyond homelessness and housing affordability, we are a proactive council. And it's a challenge of that imbalance, that fiscal imbalance between levels of government. Unfortunately, I think constitutional reform and governance reform across 3 layers of government is even beyond us, Greg. So, but we could try.
We'll work on that next week. Okay. Look, thanks so much.
I look forward to it.
Thanks. Thanks so much for your time, Alex.
Always a pleasure.
Happy Christmas and New Year to you.
You too. Take care.